One of your brothers sold you out. You are the price. Cole Maddox read the note twice. Then he looked up at the waitress standing in front of him, blonde trembling, clutching an empty tray like it could protect her from what she had just started. She had no idea what those words meant. She had no idea who had sent them. And she had absolutely no idea that by handing him that small folded piece of paper, she had just put a target on her own back that would take everything Cole had to remove. If this story grabs you from the very first second, subscribe to this channel right now, hit that notification bell, and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's go. The note was folded in thirds. That was the first thing Cole noticed. Whoever had written it had taken care creasing the paper neatly, deliberately, like they wanted it to look casual, even though nothing about it was casual at all. It was a small rectangle of white paper, barely the size of a playing card, and it had been sitting in the waitress's apron pocket for God knows how long before she finally worked up the nerve to cross the room and place it on the table in front of him. Cole didn't pick it up right away. That was something his mother had taught him when he was 9 years old, sitting at her kitchen table in Phoenix while she sorted bills she couldn't pay. Cole, baby, never reach for anything until you know what it costs. He hadn't understood what she meant back then. He understood it now. He looked at the note. He looked at the waitress. She had blonde hair pulled back too tight like she'd done it in a hurry. Her uniform had a small ketchup stain near the collar that she probably hadn't noticed yet. She wasn't pretty in the way that made men careless. She was pretty in the quiet, tired way that comes from working too hard for too long, and she had the eyes of someone who'd seen the inside of a lot of difficult situations and survived every single one of them by keeping her head down and her mouth shut. Right now, though, those eyes were doing something they probably didn't do very often. They were begging. "A man in the parking lot," she said. Her voice was low, careful, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized but wasn't sure she believed. "He gave me $300 and told me to give that to the man with the snake tattoo." Cole felt something go quiet inside him. Not the good kind of quiet, the kind that happens right before something very loud occurs. "What man?" he said. "Outside, before my shift. He was in a gray suit, not from around here, you could just tell. He said it was important. He said the man with the snake tattoo needed to see it right away." Cole looked down at his left forearm. No snake. He had an eagle on his left bicep, a compass on his right wrist, and his road name Ghost running down his ribs in letters his friend Darnell had tattooed on him after his 3rd year with the club. No snake anywhere on his body. The man with the snake tattoo sat at the bar. His name was Derek Voss, and Derek Voss was currently 19 feet away, laughing at something on his phone, completely unaware that a folded piece of paper meant for him was sitting on a table that belonged to somebody else. Cole picked up the note. He told himself later that he'd hesitated. He told himself that some instinct had fired in the back of his brain, some circuit built from years of survival in a world that didn't forgive mistakes. He told himself he had almost put it back down, almost told the waitress she'd made an error and sent her back across the room. He didn't. He unfolded it. The handwriting was block letters pressed hard into the paper. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who doesn't write very often and means every word when they do. "One of your brothers sold you out. You are the price." Cole read it once. He read it again. Then he folded it back along the original creases and set it flat on the table and looked up at the waitress whose name tag said Claire and whose face had gone the color of old chalk. "How long ago?" he said. "Maybe 40 minutes. I had 3 tables in a rush at the bar, and I kept trying to find the right moment, and She stopped herself, swallowed. "I think I gave it to the wrong person." "You think?" "The light in here is bad, and he was sitting with his back to me, and his sleeve was rolled up, and I thought..." She looked down at his arm, at the eagle, at the compass. "I thought that was a snake." Across the room, the man with the actual snake tattoo set his phone on the bar. He picked up his beer. He drank from it slowly, unhurried, the way a man drinks when he believes completely that the world is running exactly the way he wants it to run. Cole studied him. He kept his face still. That was another thing his mother had taught him, though she hadn't meant to never let anyone see you figure something out. You figure it out first, and then you decide what to do with what you know, and only then do you let your face do anything at all. His face did nothing. His mind, however, was moving very fast. One of your brothers sold you out. You are the price. The note wasn't sent to warn the recipient. That was the first thing Cole understood. A warning would have been a phone call, a text, a whisper in a parking lot from someone whose face you couldn't see. A warning would have given you time to run. This note was not a warning, it was a notification. Someone had written it and paid a stranger $300 to have it hand-delivered inside this bar, to this specific man tonight. Which meant someone wanted that man to know in this room in front of these people that his time was already over. That whatever was coming for him had already been arranged, already been paid for, already been set in motion, and all that remained was the arrival. The note was meant to watch him panic. And the man who sent it was almost certainly watching right now. Cole looked slowly around the room without moving his head. The bar was Thursday night busy, not packed, but full enough. A group of 4 men playing pool in the corner, all in civilian clothes, but with the kind of posture that said they weren't exactly civilians. 2 women at the high top near the door who'd been nursing the same drinks for 40 minutes. A man at the far end of the bar who'd been reading the same page of the same newspaper for half an hour. There, the man reading the newspaper. Cole let his gaze pass over him like he was looking at nothing and kept moving. "Go get me a beer," he said to Claire. She blinked. "What?" "A beer, whatever's on draft. Bring it to the table, write down a number on the receipt, and when you put it in front of me, don't say a word. Just go back to work and act like nothing happened." "I don't understand what's—" "Claire." He said her name like he'd known it for years, which made her go still, in a way that surprise alone couldn't have managed. "The man you were supposed to give that note to do, you know what he is." She hesitated. She'd worked at the Dust Raven for 2 years. You didn't work at the Dust Raven for 2 years without understanding at least the outline of what walked through the door most nights. "I have an idea," she said carefully. "Then you know what it means that you gave it to me instead." She did the math. Cole watched her do it. Watched the moment her eyes changed when she got to the answer. "He doesn't know," she said. "No, not yet. But the person who sent it knows you gave it to the wrong man." Cole nodded once. "So right now the only person in this room whose identity is unknown to every party involved is you. And that is an advantage, and I need you to understand that. And I need you to go get me a beer and keep moving, like everything is fine. Can you do that?" Claire looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she said, "What number do I write on the receipt?" "Your cell phone number, and then go." She went. Sonia. Cole sat with the folded note in front of him and let himself think. Derek Voss had been with the Hells Angels Red Hollow chapter for 11 years. He'd been a prospect when Cole was still trying to figure out whether this was the life he wanted. He'd earned his patch through a loyalty that at the time nobody had questioned. He was loud, dependable in the way that loud people can sometimes be. He showed up, he followed orders, he did the ugly work when it needed doing and didn't complain about it afterward. But something had changed in the last year. Cole had noticed it the way he noticed most things quietly without sharing what he'd noticed with anyone, filing it away in the part of his brain where he kept the things that didn't have names yet but would eventually. Derek had money he didn't talk about. Not club money, personal money. New boots, a watch that cost more than his bike. Little things that added up to a picture that Cole had been looking at sideways for months without being able to call it what it was. He could call it something now. The beer arrived. Claire set it down with the receipt, folded under the base of the glass, said nothing, and walked away. Cole waited 60 seconds and then picked up the receipt and unfolded it. Her handwriting was smaller than he'd expected. Neat and economical, like she was used to fitting information into tight spaces. The 10 digits of a phone number, and below them in the same neat hand, 3 more words, "The gray suit left." Cole looked at the door, then at the man with the newspaper who was still reading the same page. No, not the gray suit. The other one. He thought about the women at the high top. Still there, the pool players, still playing. The man at the far end of the bar. Gone. Cole picked up his beer, drank half of it, set it down, and pulled out his phone. He sent a text to a contact he had listed simply as Roadrunner Bar. Now, quiet. 60 seconds later, the man named Jimmy Doyle, who had been Cole's closest friend for 14 years and who answered to Roadrunner for reasons they still argued about, settled into the chair across from him like he'd been there all along. "You look like you found something," Jimmy said. "Someone sent a message into the bar tonight." Cole kept his voice level. Paid a waitress to deliver it. Wrong man got it. Jimmy picked up Cole's beer without asking and drank from it. What kind of message? Cole pushed the note across the table. Jimmy read it. His face did something complicated. A flicker of something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite surprise, but lived in the neighborhood of both, and then went carefully neutral. Where's the right man? Jimmy said. Bar, 14 feet to your left, don't. Jimmy didn't look. Who sent it? That's the part I don't know yet, but I know what it means. Someone outside the club made a deal. The deal involves one of our brothers, and the brother isn't in on the deal, or the brother is in on the deal, and this message was supposed to make sure he knew it was happening before it happened, so he'd run, so there'd be chaos, so whatever comes next has a clear path. Jimmy set the beer down. You think it's Derek? It wasn't a question. The money, Cole said, the watch, the way he's been on his phone more than usual for the last 3 months. The way he laughed too hard at the last run meeting when Priest made that joke about informants. Jimmy was quiet for a moment. That's not proof. No, but this is. Cole tapped the note. Because the person who sent this knew exactly where Derek would be tonight. Knew he'd be sitting at that bar. Knew which specific man to identify by tattoo description. That's not outside knowledge, Jimmy. That's inside knowledge with a price tag. Jimmy looked at the note for a long moment. The waitress, he said finally. She's already compromised. How? She told me the man in the gray suit left, which means he's been watching this room and he watched her give the note to me instead of Derek, and he already knows the delivery went wrong. Cole picked up the beer, finished it. She walked into this tonight. She didn't know what it was. She's got nothing to do with any of this. Cole, she's not part of this. Jimmy looked at him the way he'd been looking at him for 14 years, like he was trying to calculate the weight of whatever Cole had already decided, and then leaned back in his chair. What do you want to do? Jimmy said. I want to know who sent the note, and I want the person who sent it to believe for as long as possible that it was delivered to the right man. And Derek. Cole looked across the room at Derek Voss, who was still at the bar, still on his phone, still utterly certain that the night was going exactly the way he expected it to go. Derek doesn't leave this bar without me knowing where he's going, Cole said. And the waitress, Cole was quiet for a moment. She's going to need a reason to stay close, he said, until I know whether anyone saw her face tonight. Claire had been working at the Dust Raven for 2 years and 2 months, and in that time she had served drinks to men who dealt in violence the way other men dealt in insurance or real estate, with paperwork and procedures and a fundamental belief that what they did was simply the industry they happened to be in. She had learned to look at those men the way she looked at bad weather, with awareness and distance, and no illusions about her ability to change it. She had not learned to feel nothing. Her hands were steady because she'd trained them to be steady. Her face was blank because she'd trained it to be blank. But her heart was doing something uncontrolled, an unscripted beating in a pattern that had nothing to do with her training and everything to do with the look in the biker's eyes when he said her name, Cole. She didn't know his road name. She just knew the name another waitress had used once in a voice that carried the specific reverence people use for things they're a little afraid of. That's Cole Maddox. He doesn't come in here much. When he does, you leave him alone unless he calls you over. She had left him alone for 2 years, and then some stranger in a gray suit had handed her $300 in a folded piece of paper, and everything had stopped being simple. She wiped down a table she'd already wiped down and tried to think clearly. The man in the gray suit had been professional in the way that money sometimes makes people professional, not warm, not cold, just efficient, the way a tool is efficient. He'd found her in the parking lot before her shift, already knowing her name, already knowing her schedule, and he'd explained what he needed with the brevity of someone who has paid for brevity. There's a man inside who needs this message. Snake tattoo on his neck. You'll see it when he turns his head. $300 for one delivery, no questions, no looking back. She had looked at the money. She had thought about her nursing school application sitting half-finished on her kitchen table, and the tuition balance that had been laughing at her for 8 months, and the way her mother had looked at her the last time they talked with that careful lack of hope that is somehow worse than outright disappointment. She had taken the money. And then the light in the bar had been bad, and her section had been slammed, and she looked at the man at the corner table from across the room and seen a tattoo on his arm, and thought, yes, that's the one. Go now before you lose your nerve. And now here she was, wiping down a table she'd already cleaned twice, trying to figure out how bad the mistake actually was, trying to figure out whether the sick feeling in her stomach was guilt or fear or something worse than both. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out of her apron pocket, expecting a text from the rideshare app or her roommate or literally anyone in the world except the person it turned out to be. Don't go to your car after your shift. Wait by the kitchen door. No name. Just a number she'd seen exactly once before, written on a receipt she'd slid under a glass of draft beer 14 minutes ago. Claire stared at the message. Then she looked across the bar at Cole Maddox, who was sitting at his table with another man she didn't recognize, both of them talking quietly, both of them looking for all the world like two people discussing nothing important. She typed back, "Why?" The reply came in 4 seconds, "Because someone watched you hand me that note, and they're deciding right now what to do about it." Claire set her phone back in her apron pocket. She went to table 7 and took their order without writing it down, because after 2 years she had the entire menu memorized and her brain needed something to do that wasn't thinking about what she just read. She got the order right. She went back to the kitchen. She told her manager she needed 5 minutes. In the service hallway alone with the smell of grease and cigarette smoke and the distant sound of the jukebox playing something old and sad, Claire Whitmore leaned against the wall and did 3 things in rapid succession. She breathed. She counted to 10. And she decided that whatever came next, she was not going to pretend that the thing she'd started tonight was something she could walk away from by simply walking out the door. The man at the end of the bar had a name. Cole found it out 40 minutes later through a series of phone calls he made from the parking lot while Jimmy Doyle sat inside and watched Derek Voss order his 3rd beer and text someone he didn't show the screen to. The man's name was Victor Cross. He worked for an organization out of Tucson that the Red Hollow chapter had been aware of for 3 years without ever having direct conflict with an outfit that operated in the space between official criminal enterprise and something harder to define, the kind of organization that doesn't have a name anyone uses out loud. They moved money, they moved people, they moved information. And 8 months ago, according to the source Cole reached on the phone, a man who owed him a favor of the kind that never expires. Victor Cross had sat down with an associate of the Red Hollow Hells Angels in a restaurant in Mesa, Arizona, and discussed a transaction. The associate's description matched Derek Voss. Cole stood in the parking lot and listened to this information and felt something settle in him. Not satisfaction. Something harder than satisfaction. The feeling of a thing you've suspected becoming a thing you know, and the knowledge changing the weight of everything you carry. He thanked his source. He ended the call. He stood still for a moment. Then he texted Jimmy, "Derek leaves you follow. I'll be right behind." And then he texted another number, the one that belonged to the president of the Red Hollow chapter, a man named Priest who had been in the game longer than Cole had been alive, and who Cole trusted with exactly the kind of news that ended careers and changed the shape of things forever. "Need to talk tonight, not on the phone. Club only." Priest's response came in 6 seconds. "How bad?" Cole thought about the note, thought about Victor Cross and his newspaper, and the careful performance of someone watching without being seen. Thought about Derek Voss's new watch, and his off-screen texts, and his too loud laugh at the joke about informants. He typed "bad enough." Then he went back inside. At 11:47, Derek Voss paid his tab. Jimmy Doyle had already moved to a stool near the door, nursing a soda water, his eyes on his phone. Cole was back at his table, the empty beer glass still in front of him, watching Derek's body language the way he had learned to watch it, not the obvious stuff, not the gestures and expressions that people perform for each other, but the small involuntary things. The way a man's shoulders sit when he's comfortable. The way they change when he's not. Derek's shoulders were tight. He'd been on his phone 3 more times in the last 40 minutes, and each time he'd angled the screen away from the man beside him, which was a habit so practiced it had stopped looking like a habit and started looking like breathing automatic. Unconscious, something he'd been doing long enough that he no longer noticed he was doing it. He stood, put on his jacket, said something to the bartender that made the bartender laugh. At the door he paused. Cole watched him pause. In the pause, 2 seconds, maybe 3. Derek turned and looked back into the bar with an expression that could have been casual, could have been nostalgic, could have been the look of a man saying goodbye to something he expected to miss. Could have been any of those things. It wasn't any of those things. It was the look of a man checking to make sure he hadn't been followed. Derek's eyes swept the room, across the pool table, across the high top, across the bar. They landed briefly on Cole's table and moved past without stopping. Cole was looking at his empty glass. The door swung shut. 14 seconds later, Jimmy Doyle's bar stool was empty. Cole waited 60 seconds, said nothing to nobody, left enough cash on the table to cover the beer and a tip that the waitress named Claire had earned about 6 times over tonight, and walked toward the back of the bar. The kitchen door, she was already there. She looked smaller back here. The bar lighting had given her a kind of constructed confidence, the professional face of someone who'd learned to be visible only when she chose to be. Back here in the unforgiving brightness of the service hallway, she looked her age, which Cole estimated at somewhere between 22 and 25, and she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had done something tonight that she didn't fully understand and was now standing in a hallway waiting to find out what it cost. "You stayed," he said. "You told me to." "I told you to wait. I didn't know if you would." Claire looked at him steadily. "You knew I would," she said. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have texted the warning." He almost smiled. Almost. "The man who gave you the money," he said. "Tell me everything. Not the summary everything, what he looked like, what he said, the exact order he said it, what he did with his hands, whether there was anyone with him, what direction he came from, what direction he went." She told him. She told him in the organized detail by detail way of someone who'd been trained to remember things accurately, and he realized after a moment that this wasn't an accident. She spoke like a person who'd spent time studying medicine or law or some other field where the difference between what you actually observed and what you assumed you observed was the difference between a correct answer and a wrong one. When she finished, Cole was quiet for a moment. "He found you before your shift," he said. "Yes." "He knew your name." "Yes." "He knew your schedule." "Yes." "Claire." He said her name the same way he'd said it across the bar, with that particular weight that wasn't meant to frighten her, but that told the truth anyway. "The man who gave you that money has been watching this bar, and you. Probably for a while. The question is why he chose you specifically." Something moved across her face. "He said I had an honest face." Cole looked at her. "He said it like a compliment," she added, "but I don't think it was." "No," Cole agreed. "It wasn't. It means he chose you because he thought you were safe, controllable, someone who would take the money and deliver the message and go home and forget it." He paused. "He chose wrong." "Because I gave it to the wrong man. Because you came back here and you're still talking to me." Cole held her gaze. "That's not what a scared person does." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "I am scared," she said. "I know, that's not what I said." She was quiet. "Then what happens now?" "Now," Cole said, "I need to know if anyone else at this bar tonight knows your name. The staff, my manager, the regulars who've been coming in for years. The man with the newspaper end of the bar, do you know him?" She thought, shook her head. "He was watching you," Cole said. "Not in the way men watch waitresses. He was watching your movement. He watched you cross the room to my table. He was gone by the time you came back." The color didn't exactly drain from her face. It was more like her face made a small decision to stop pretending. "He saw me give it to you." "I believe so, yes." "So they know. They know the delivery went wrong. What they don't know yet is what that means for them." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card, plain white, a phone number, nothing else, and held it out to her. "Can you get someone to cover the rest of your shift?" She stared at the card without taking it. "Where would I go? Somewhere that isn't your apartment." She looked up at him. "Because they know my name. Because he found you in a parking lot and knew your schedule. Which means he's had at least a day, maybe more. Which means he knows where I live." She said it flat. Not a question, not a gasp, just a fact being processed by a person who processes facts carefully. "Yes." She took the card. She put it in her apron pocket. She reached up with one hand and smoothed a strand of hair that didn't need smoothing, the single involuntary gesture of a person pulling themselves back together. And then she looked at Cole Maddox with the eyes of someone who had just made a decision they couldn't unmake. "Okay," she said. "What do you need from me?" Cole looked at her. This was the moment he would think later. Not the note, not the mistake with the tattoo, Not even the moment he had read those words and understood what they meant. This was the moment. Right now, he said, I need you to trust me. I know that's a lot to ask from someone you met 40 minutes ago. Claire looked at him steadily. You could have walked out without warning me, she said. You could have left me here and handled whatever this is on your own. Yes. You didn't. No. She nodded once, a small decisive motion like something closing properly. Then I trust you, she said. Tell me what comes next. And Cole Maddox, who had spent 14 years learning not to be surprised by anything, was surprised, not by the trust, by the fact that he meant it when he said what came next. Then stay close, he said, because tonight is just the beginning and I need you where I can see you. Outside in the desert night, Jimmy Doyle followed Derek Voss's taillights toward the edge of town, where the road met the darkness and the darkness met something much worse. And on the other side of the city, in a nondescript office above a dry cleaning shop, Victor Cross sat across a table from a man with a phone and a calm expression, and the man said the note wasn't delivered correctly. Victor Cross looked at his hands. Then we move to the backup plan, he said, and we start with the girl. Jimmy Doyle called at 12:17 in the morning. Cole had Claire in the passenger seat of his truck, moving through the dark streets of Red Hollow at a speed that was deliberate without being reckless. Because reckless was how you got noticed, and getting noticed right now was the last thing either of them needed. He answered on the first ring. Talk to me, Cole said. He went to the docks. Jimmy's voice was low and clipped the voice he used when he was reporting from somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. East Side, the old freighter terminal. He didn't go inside. He stood at the gate for about 4 minutes, made a phone call, and then left. Which direction? North, toward the highway. I backed off when he hit the ramp and didn't want him to make me. Good. Cole kept his eyes on the road. Who was at the docks? That's the thing. A pause that had weight to it. Lights inside. 3 vehicles I did not recognize, not club, not local. Arizona plates, but rental stickers on the bumpers. Cole processed that. Rental vehicles at the freight terminal at midnight. Derek standing at the gate long enough to confirm something, but not long enough to go inside. A phone call, a confirmation call. He was checking, Cole said, making sure they're in position. That's what it felt like. Cole, whatever they're planning, it's not tomorrow, it's tonight. Cole looked at the clock on the dash. 12:18. How many? 3 vehicles. Could be 2 per vehicle, could be 5. I couldn't get close enough. Don't. Go to the chapter house. Wake up Priest if he isn't already awake. Tell him exactly what you told me the docks. The vehicle's Derek at the gate. Tell him I'm on my way. What about you? 20 minutes behind you. He ended the call and kept driving and didn't say anything for a moment because he was thinking, and thinking required a specific kind of silence that Claire seemed to understand without being told, because she sat beside him. Without speaking, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing controlled, and even in the way of someone who is not calm but has decided to behave as though calm is achievable. The freight terminal, she said finally. It wasn't a question. Cole glanced at her. You heard. Hard not to in a truck cab. She paused. I know that terminal. It shut down 3 years ago. My cousin used to work the night security there before they let everyone go. What do you know about the layout? She looked at him. You're asking me. You said your cousin worked there. I'm asking what you know. Something shifted in her expression, a recalibration, like she was adjusting to a version of this conversation she hadn't anticipated. 1 main building, 2 loading bays on the east side, 1 on the west. There's a service road that runs behind it that doesn't show on most maps. My cousin used it to get in when the front gate was locked. It comes out near the water. Cole was quiet for 3 seconds. Why does that matter? Claire asked. Because if I'm bringing people into that terminal, I need a way in that isn't the front gate that Derek Voss just confirmed is being watched. She absorbed that. Then you're going after them tonight. I'm going to make sure my people are ready. Whatever happens tonight, I want us to choose when it happens, not them. Claire turned her face toward the window. Cole couldn't see her expression, but he could see her hands, and her hands had stopped being still. The man who sent me into that bar, she said. Victor Cross. He looked at her sharply. How do you know that name? The man in the gray suit. She turned back. He gave me a business card when he gave me the money. I almost threw it away. It's in my pocket. Cole pulled the truck to the side of the road. He stopped. He looked at her. "Claire," he said, and his voice had a quality in it that wasn't anger and wasn't surprise, but was something that happened in the space between the two. "Give me the card." She reached into her apron pocket. She was still in her uniform, hadn't had time to change, hadn't had time for anything, and pulled out a small white card and held it out to him. He took it. It was plain. Heavyweight cardstock, the kind that costs more than it needs to. One side blank, Baspaikang. The other side had a phone number and 2 words cross meridian. No address, no title, no first name. But below the number pressed into the card in letters so small you had to hold it in the right light to read them. If delivery confirmed, call this number. If not confirmed, destroy this card. Cole read that line twice. He looked up at Claire. "He expected you to call him afterward," he said. "I know. He gave you a card with his contact information, which means he was confident enough in the delivery that he gave a stranger his actual number." Cole turned the card over. "Or he wasn't worried about being traced, which means the number isn't traceable." "Or," Claire said quietly, "he wanted a way to know immediately if something went wrong." The words settled between them. "He hasn't heard from you," Cole said. "No." Which means by now he knows the delivery didn't happen the way he planned, which is what the man with the newspaper already told him. He looked at the card again. "But he doesn't know what I know. He doesn't know what the message said." Claire was watching him. "Does he know you have the card?" Cole thought about it. "No, you were hired for a single delivery. The card was your way of confirming it worked. Nobody told you to show it to anyone. As far as Cross knows, you have a card with a number on it that you're either about to call or about to throw away. And if I called it right now..." The air in the truck changed. Cole looked at her for a long moment. "If you called it right now," he said slowly, "and told him the delivery was made, he'd believe you. For long enough. For long enough to do what? To give us the window we need." He held the card between 2 fingers. "He's waiting at a phone. His people are at the docks. Derek is somewhere between here and wherever Derek goes when the plan shifts. If Cross gets a confirmation call, he holds his people in position. He waits for the next step to play out. He doesn't accelerate." Claire looked at the card. "You want me to call him," she said. "I want you to understand what I'm asking before I ask it. You're asking me to lie to the man who hired me to do something I already did wrong." "I'm asking you to buy time," Cole said. "That's all. 1 call. You tell him it's done, delivery confirmed. You hang up. You never call again." She looked out the windshield. The desert road stretched ahead of them, dark and empty and very long. "And if he asks me something I can't answer? If he asks about the recipient's reaction, tell him the man read it and left immediately. That's believable. That's what a man would do. And if he knows I'm lying, then we find out faster than we would have otherwise." Cole held the card out to her. "You don't have to do this. I want to be clear about that. You didn't sign up for any of what tonight became. I can take you somewhere safe and handle this without you, and you never have to see any of these people again." Claire looked at the card. She didn't take it. Not yet. "You said something in the bar," she said. "You said I didn't betray you, that I saved you without knowing it." "I meant it." "Then let me do it with knowing it." She took the card. "What exactly do I say?" Cole told her. She listened without interrupting, asking 2 clarifying questions in the voice of someone who needed the information to be precise, not reassuring. When he finished, she nodded, once pulled out her phone, dialed the number, and put the call on speaker. It rang twice. "Yes." Cross's voice was exactly what she'd expected, even controlled the voice of a man who answered phones at midnight with the same effect he'd use at noon. "It's done," Claire said. Her voice was steady, not performed steady, which would have sounded wrong, genuinely steady, the way a person sounds when they've decided that fear is not currently useful. "Delivery confirmed." He read it and left the bar. A silence. Not long. 3 seconds, maybe 4. "Any reaction?" Cross said. He looked like he understood it. He left fast. Another silence. Shorter this time. "Good," Cross said. "You won't hear from us again." The line went dead. Claire lowered the phone. Her hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, Cole thought, but from adrenaline, which was a different thing and a more honest one. "He believed it," she said. "He wanted to believe it." Cole put the truck back in gear, which is almost the same thing, for now. He drove. 12:31. They had time, but not the kind of time that forgives waste. "Where are we going?" Claire asked. "Chapter House. You're going to sit in a room with a woman named Martha while I talk to the people I need to talk to. You'll be safe there. Martha will make you coffee that's too strong and tell you it'll put hair on your chest and you'll drink it because it's something to do with your hands." Despite everything, something almost like a laugh moved across Claire's face. "And then what?" she said. "And then we figure out what Derek sold us into." The chapter house was 20 minutes from the bar under normal circumstances. Cole made it in 14. He pulled up and Jimmy Doyle was already on the porch, arms crossed, watching them come up the drive with the expression of a man who has learned to expect unexpected things and has simply incorporated that expectation into his resting face. He looked at Cole, he looked at Claire, he looked at Cole again. "Martha's inside," he said. "Good. Priest's inside, too. He's not happy." "When is he?" Jimmy held the door. Priest was 61 years old and had been running the Red Hollow chapter of the Hells Angels for 19 of those years, and in that time he had dealt with betrayal twice before, once from a man he'd considered a brother since childhood, and once from a prospect who'd been flipped by a federal task force. Both times he had handled it with the particular combination of coldness and deliberateness that comes from having learned that anger is a luxury and patience is a weapon. He was sitting at the head of the long table in the back room when Cole walked in, and he looked at Cole with eyes that had already done whatever calculating they needed to do and had arrived somewhere decisive. "Tell me," Priest said. Cole told him. He laid it out the way he laid out everything for Priest, in order without editorializing, giving the facts their space and letting Priest be the one to decide what they weighed. The note, Claire, the wrong tattoo, Victor Cross, the business card, the docks, Derek at the gate, the rental vehicles, the call Claire had just made. When Cole finished, the room was quiet. There were 4 other men at the table. Roadrunner Jimmy at Cole's left, a man named Shepard, who handled the chapter's finances and had been the first one to notice the irregularities in certain accounts 3 months ago that he hadn't been able to explain. A man named Boone, who was the chapter's sergeant-at-arms and who had the kind of physical stillness that functions as a warning. And a man named Leon, who was the oldest member after Priest and who had seen more than anyone in the room and showed none of it on his face. Priest looked at each of them in turn. Then he said, "The docks. East Terminal," Cole confirmed. 3 vehicles, unknown number of personnel. Derek confirmed the position. That's what the gate visit was. He wasn't going in. He was checking the lights. Priest nodded slowly. "What do they want?" The note said, "You are the price." I think Derek promised them something about the club's operations. Roots contact storage, something that would let an outside organization move their business through our territory without friction. They don't want a war, they want access. And Derek gets what? Money, safety, a new life somewhere these people have reach. Cole paused. He was always going to disappear after tonight. Whatever happens at those docks, Derek was never planning to be here for the aftermath. Shepard leaned forward. "The accounts." He said it like a stone dropping into still water. "The last 8 months, the discrepancies I couldn't trace. 2 withdrawals that didn't match any expenditure I could document. I flagged them for Derek to review because he was handling that quarter's books. The silence that followed was the kind that has a specific texture, the texture of a room full of people understanding something at the same moment. He was the one reviewing his own theft," Leon said. "He was the one who told me I'd made a calculation error," Shepard said. "I went back 3 times. I couldn't find my mistake because there wasn't one. The mistake was his." Priest put both hands flat on the table. He looked at them for a moment, his own hands large and scarred and still, and then he looked up. "How long do we have?" he said to Cole. "Cross bought the confirmation call for maybe 2 hours. After that, when the next step doesn't happen on his timeline, he'll know something's wrong." 2 hours. Priest repeated it without inflection. Then, "The service road behind the terminal. Can we get vehicles through?" Cole looked at him. "You already know about it. Leon used to run that road before the terminal closed. He mentioned it once 3 years ago. I stored it." Priest looked at Leon. "How wide?" "Wide enough for 2 trucks side by side," Leon said. "Last time I was on it anyway. That was 2 years back." "It'll hold," Cole said. "I got the information from someone who'd know." Jimmy looked at him sideways. Nobody else asked. Priest made a decision. Cole could see it happen, not gradually, not after further deliberation, but in the specific moment when Priest's shoulders settled and his eyes went from calculating to certain. "We go to the docks," Priest said, "but we don't go to fight. We go to finish this cleanly and completely with enough evidence to make sure Derek Voss never has a reason to run his mouth to anyone else again." He looked around the table. "I want to know exactly what he promised them and who he promised it to. I want the documentation." Cole. "I'll go in first." "No." Priest looked at him steadily. "You'll go in smart. There's a difference. Jimmy goes with you. Boone and Leon come in from the service road on my signal. Shepard stays here and starts pulling every financial record Derek has ever touched." He paused. "And the woman? She's in the kitchen," Cole said. "She's not involved. She delivered a message into this clubhouse's territory that was meant to start a war. That makes her involved, whether anyone intended it." Priest held Cole's gaze. "She's also the only person who has spoken directly to Victor Cross and can give us a physical description and a voice. I'm not asking you to put her in danger, Cole. I'm asking whether she's an asset." Cole thought about Claire in the parking lot of the Dust Raven, in the hallway behind the kitchen, in the passenger seat of his truck, the way she'd held the phone and made the call without her voice breaking, the way she'd answered his questions about the terminal layout, without asking why he needed to know the two clarifying questions she'd asked before the call that told him she was thinking ahead, not just reacting. "She's an asset," he said. "Then use her like one." Priest stood. "We move in 40 minutes. The room moved with him, chairs pushing back, voices dropping into the low, purposeful register of people who have been given a task and intend to complete it. Cole was halfway to the door when Priest said his name once. He stopped. Priest looked at him across the emptying room with an expression that wasn't quite sentiment and wasn't quite warning. "The note," Priest said. "It was meant for Derek." "Yes, but it found you." Priest was quiet for a moment. "You believe that was an accident?" "I do." "And the girl, also an accident?" Priest nodded slowly. "Sometimes accidents are the only honest thing in a dishonest situation." He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. "Keep her safe." It was not a request. "I know," Cole said. Martha Reynolds was 64 years old and had been feeding members of the Red Hollow chapter for 11 years, and she had a philosophy about trouble that she developed through long practice and that she shared with Claire at 12:47 in the morning over 2 cups of coffee that were, as advertised, significantly stronger than necessary. "When men like these get quiet," Martha said, refilling both cups without asking, "you don't interrupt the quiet. The quiet is them thinking. You want them thinking. The time to worry is when they stop being quiet and start being loud." Claire wrapped both hands around the mug. "How loud does it get?" "Depends on what it is." Martha sat down across from her at the kitchen table, not with the careful deliberateness of someone choosing their words, but with the ease of someone who has said difficult, true things so many times that the saying of them no longer requires preparation. "Tonight has the feel of something they've been waiting to deal with for a while. You can tell by the way they're moving, not rushed, just decided." "What does that mean for what happens?" "Means they already know what they're going to do. They're just putting on their coats." Martha drank her coffee. "Where are you from, honey, before the Dust Raven?" "Phoenix originally. Moved here 8 months ago for a program I was trying to get into." "What program?" "Nursing." Claire looked at the table. "I'm still trying." Martha looked at her for a moment. "You got the kind of brain for it. I can tell by how you're sitting right now. You're scared, but you're not panicking. You're processing. That's a skill." "Or I'm in shock," Claire said. "Shock doesn't ask questions the way you do. Shock goes quiet." Martha set down her mug. "You asked Cole what kind of layout the terminal has. I heard you from the hallway. Shock doesn't do that." Claire looked up at her. "How long have you been with this chapter?" Claire asked. "Since my husband brought me through that door in 2013 and told me they needed someone who could cook for 40 men on a Friday night." Martha smiled at something Claire couldn't see. "He's gone 3 years now, but this is still my kitchen." There was a quality to the way she said it, not grief exactly, but the thing that comes after grief when you've carried it long enough that it becomes simply part of the weight you're used to. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "Don't be. He had a good life and he knew it." Martha picked up her mug again. The question isn't how long I've been here. The question is what you're going to do when tonight's over. Claire opened her mouth to say something and then stopped because she didn't have an answer to that question. She'd been moving forward on instinct since the moment in the parking lot when a man in a gray suit said her name and held out $300. An instinct was useful, but it didn't come with a map of where it was taking you. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Martha nodded like that was exactly the right answer. Then you're already smarter than most people who come through this kitchen. The back door opened. Cole stood in the doorway and looked at Claire with the same direct quality he'd had since the moment she met him. No warmth performance, no softening of what needed to be said, but something in his eyes that was not unkind. I need to ask you something, he said, and you can say no. Martha stood up from the table with the timing of someone who has learned when to give people space, refilled the coffee pot, and found something urgent to do on the other side of the kitchen. Cole sat down across from Claire. He looked at her in the kitchen light the way he'd looked at her in the bar, reading something that wasn't on her face exactly but came through it. Priest wants to know if you'd be willing to give a description of Victor Cross, he said. Not in the field, not anywhere near what's happening tonight. Just a shepherd here so he can cross-reference it against what he's finding in the accounts. A voice description too, anything you remember from the phone call. Is that all? Claire said. Cole paused. No, she waited. There's something else, but I want to know if you understand why Priest is asking before I tell you what it is. He thinks I'm useful, Claire said. Not bitterly, just accurately. He thinks you're capable. Cole's voice was level. There's a difference, and I want to make sure you know it. You were pulled into this tonight because someone used you without your knowledge or consent. Priest is not doing that. He's asking. You can say no to any part of this, and I will make sure you are safe regardless. Claire looked at him. What's the second thing, she said. Cole was quiet for a moment. Cross gave you that card expecting you to call. When he finds out the call was a misdirection, and he will find out probably within the hour, he's going to have questions about the woman who made it. He already has questions about me. Yes, but right now those questions don't have answers. The moment this goes wrong on his end, he's going to start looking very hard for the answers. And the most direct answer to all of his questions is you. Cole held her gaze. I need you to stay in this building tonight. Not because you're being held, you're not. Because being somewhere else right now is the most dangerous thing you could be. Claire thought about her apartment, the parking lot she'd walked out of 5 hours ago when a stranger knew her name before she gave it to him. The way Victor Cross had said good in the brief, flat voice of a man accustomed to having things go his way. I'll stay, she said. Okay. Cole? She stopped him as he started to rise. When you go to the docks tonight, we're not going to fight, he said. We're going to document. That's not what I was going to ask. She met his eyes. Come back. He looked at her. In 14 years of doing the kind of work that the chapter needed done, a lot of people had told Cole to be careful. Careful was what you said when you were afraid of the thing you couldn't control. Come back was something different. Come back was said by someone who intended to be there when you did. I'll come back, he said. He left. Martha brought the coffee pot back to the table without comment. At 1:15 in this morning, Cole Maddox and Jimmy Doyle moved through the dark toward the East Freight Terminal by a route that didn't involve the front gate, and the information that Claire Whitmore had given them about the service road proved correct in every particular width location, the gap in the fencing at the northeast corner that her cousin had used and apparently never reported. They were not the first ones through. That was the first wrong thing. The second wrong thing was the sound, or rather the absence of it. 3 vehicles worth of men at a terminal at 1 in the morning should have produced some noise. Voices, movement, the particular acoustic signature of people waiting. Silence. Jimmy put his hand on Cole's arm. They both stopped. Cole looked at the loading bay doors on the east side, which should have been closed, which were open. He looked at the 3 vehicles, which were exactly where Jimmy had described them, which were empty. He looked at the light coming from inside the terminal building, which was not the stationary light of people holding position. It was moving. They changed the plan, Jimmy said, barely a breath. They moved. Cole looked back toward the service road. When Cross got the confirmation call and it didn't match what his man saw in the bar, he didn't wait. He advanced. Advanced to what? Cole was already moving. To the secondary target, he said. He pulled out his phone and called Priest. One ring. We've got a problem, Cole said. The terminal's empty. They moved early. Cross advanced when the confirmation call didn't match his surveillance. Priest's voice was absolutely even. Secondary target. I don't know what it is, but Cross has one. He had to. You don't send a backup watcher into a bar unless you're accounting for scenarios. A silence. Then Priest said very quietly, Cole, the woman who made the confirmation call. Cole stopped walking. He felt something drop through his chest, not fear exactly, but the specific weight of a mistake he hadn't seen coming because he'd been looking at the wrong thing. Cross hadn't advanced on the chapter. Cross had advanced on the source of the call. The woman whose voice he'd just heard. The woman he could trace. Cole was running before he finished the thought, and Jimmy was running beside him, and neither of them said anything because there was nothing to say, and the truck was 30 yards away, and the chapter house was 14 minutes on a good road, and Claire Whitmore was in Martha's kitchen drinking coffee that was too strong, waiting for a man who had told her he would come back. He was coming back. He just needed to get there before Victor Cross did. Cole drove the way men drive when something they care about is at stake. Not recklessly, not with the kind of speed that announces itself, but with the compressed, focused intensity of someone who has calculated exactly how much time they have and exactly what it costs to waste a second of it. His phone was on the dash, Priest's line still open. I'm calling Martha, Priest said. Already tried, it's ringing out. A pause, not long. Boone and Leon are 3 minutes from the house. I'm 9 minutes. Cole, I know. He took the turn onto the highway without slowing. Talk to me about Derek. Jimmy lost him after the terminal. Derek knew we'd go to the docks. That was the point. He confirmed the position, fed us the location, and then cleared out before we arrived. Cole gripped the wheel. Cross never needed the docks. The docks were the distraction. Then what did Cross actually want? Cole thought about the note. One of your brothers sold you out. You are the price. He'd been reading that message as a threat against the club, against the leadership, the operations, the network Derek had access to. He'd been thinking about routes and contacts and storage and the kind of information an insider could sell to an outside organization looking to expand its footprint. He'd been thinking about it wrong. Not what Cole said. Who? Priest was quiet. Derek didn't sell them a location or a schedule, Cole said. Derek sold them a person, someone Cross could use leverage testimony, something that makes the club vulnerable in a way that a shootout at a freight terminal doesn't. He pressed harder on the accelerator. That's why the note said, you are the price. It was specific. It was personal. Who? Priest said again, and this time the word had a different weight. Cole didn't answer because he didn't know the answer yet, and saying what he was afraid of out loud felt like the kind of thing that made it more true, and he didn't have space for that right now. What he had space for was the road and the distance and the 9 minutes becoming 8, becoming 7. I'll call you from the house, he said and ended the call. Jimmy said nothing from the passenger seat. He had his own phone out and was moving through something on it with the focused economy of motion of a man doing a specific task. After a moment, he said without looking up, Cross Meridian, I got a thread on it. Talk. It's not a company, not registered anywhere as a business. But the name shows up twice in the last 18 months in connection with federal asset seizure cases out of Tucson, both times as a third party in financial transactions that got flagged and then quietly unflagged. Jimmy looked up. Someone has a relationship with a federal office. Cole felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the night air. Derek didn't just sell us to a criminal organization, he said, or he sold us to an organization that has protection from one, Jimmy said, which is worse. It was worse. Cole knew exactly how much worse it was because a criminal organization you could fight with the tools you had. An organization with federal adjacency fought back with tools you couldn't touch. Subpoenas, sealed warrants. The kind of pressure that doesn't arrive with men at your door, but with letters that close your businesses and freeze your accounts and turn the people around you into witnesses. 6 minutes. He pushed the truck faster. The woman, Jimmy said quietly. Cole looked at him. If Cross wanted leverage, Jimmy said not unkindly, just factually, and Derek gave him someone specific, the waitress who made the call is on his radar for a different reason than we thought. He paused. She's not collateral, Cole. She might be the point. Cole stared at the road. Why her, he said, though he was already building the answer as he asked the question. Because she's nobody. She's not a member, not a family, not someone the club would formally protect under any structure Cross could document. She walked in off the street tonight, made a phone call that misdirected his operation, and walked back out. On paper, she's completely exposed. Jimmy set his phone down. She's the cleanest kind of leverage, the kind where the people you're pressuring can't officially admit how much they care. Cole said nothing. He drove. 5 minutes. His phone rang, unknown number. He answered it on speaker without thinking because he was thinking about other things, and the voice that came through the cab was even and controlled and immediately recognizable from the single word it had spoken during Claire's call. Mr. Maddox, Victor Cross said. Cole said nothing. He kept driving. I want to apologize for the confusion tonight, Cross continued. His voice was the voice of a man who uses politeness, the way other men use weapons with precision for effect with no warmth behind it. This situation got complicated because of factors that weren't properly managed on my end. I take responsibility for that. Is that right? Cole said. I had expected a cleaner exchange. The woman's involvement was a pause. Unfortunate. She was meant to be incidental. She is incidental. Of course. Cross's tone didn't change. Then you won't mind if we conclude our business without involving her further. Cole looked at Jimmy. Jimmy was recording the call on his own phone, 2 hands absolutely still. What business? Cole said. The business your colleague Derek Voss initiated 8 months ago. He made certain representations about the club's willingness to cooperate with expanded operations in your territory. Representations we paid for in advance. Another pause. We'd like to collect on what we paid for. Derek Voss doesn't speak for this club. No, Cross agreed pleasantly. That became clear tonight, which is why I'm speaking to you instead of waiting for him to manage this situation. A beat. You're the one who matters, Mr. Maddox. Priest makes the decisions, but you're the one who implements them, and you're the one who found the note before it reached its intended recipient, which tells me you're the one whose judgment I should have engaged from the beginning. Cole turned onto the road that led to the chapter house. 2 minutes. What do you want? Cole said. One conversation. In person at a location of your choosing within the next 24 hours. You, me, and confirmation that the arrangements Derek promised are still on the table. Cross's voice remained even. In exchange, the young woman goes home tonight. The card she's carrying becomes irrelevant. And whatever documentation we've gathered about certain club activities in the past 36 months disappears permanently. Cole pulled the truck to a stop outside the chapter house. Every light in the building was on. That was wrong. When he'd left 40 minutes ago, only the kitchen and the back room had been lit. Full illumination meant either that Priest had put everyone on alert or that someone else had arrived and changed the terms of the evening. I'll call you back in 1 hour, Cole said. I'll be waiting, Cross said, and the line went dead. Cole was out of the truck before it fully stopped Jimmy half a step behind him, and he went through the front door with his hand on his jacket and his eyes moving immediately to the room. Martha was standing in the kitchen doorway. She was standing in it deliberately, the specific position of a person who is physically blocking something while trying to look like she's doing nothing of the kind. Her face was arranged into an expression of careful neutrality that Cole recognized as the face she made when she was furious, and had decided that fury was not currently the most useful tool available. Where is she? Cole said. Kitchen, Martha said. She's fine. She stopped. She lowered her voice by half. There's a man in the back room with Priest. He came in 20 minutes ago. Cole, I need you to understand that I have never seen Priest look at someone the way he's looking at this man. Who is it? He said his name is Voss. Cole went still. Not Derek, Martha said quickly. An older one. He said his name is Raymond Voss and he's Derek's father, and whatever he told Priest in that room, Priest hasn't come out in 18 minutes. Cole looked at Jimmy. Jimmy looked at Cole. Neither of them had ever heard of a Raymond Voss. In 11 years of Derek's membership, Derek had never mentioned a father, never mentioned family at all in the particular way that some people don't mention things, because mentioning them would require explaining them, and the explanation is the part they can't afford. Where's Boone? Cole said. Back room with Priest. Leon's outside. Martha looked at him steadily. Go see Claire first. She heard the man come in, and she needs to see a face she trusts before she hears whatever's about to come out of that back room. Cole went to the kitchen. Claire was at the table with both hands around a coffee mug that had long since gone cold, and when he came through the door, she looked up at him with the specific expression of someone who has been holding a very controlled position for an extended period of time and is profoundly relieved that the person they were holding it for has finally arrived. "You're back," she said. "I said I would be." She let out a slow breath. Not dramatic, just real, the sound of someone releasing something they'd been holding in their chest. "The docks. What happened?" "Empty. They moved before we got there." He sat down across from her. "Cross called me. On my cell." Her eyes sharpened. "How does he have your number?" "Derek." Cole said it flat. Derek gave him everything: numbers, names, the chapters to structure. He's been feeding Cross for 8 months. What did Cross want? "A meeting. 24 hours. He wants the arrangements Derek promised." "And if you don't meet with him?" Cole looked at her. He didn't answer directly because the direct answer involved her, and he wasn't ready to have that conversation in the compressed time they had. Instead, he said, "There's someone in the back room with Priest, Derek's father." Claire stared at him. "Derek has a father, apparently. What does that mean for tonight?" "I don't know yet." He stood. "I need to go find out. Will you stay here, Cole?" She said his name with the same weight he used on hers, not performing concern, just being honest with it. "Whatever's in that room, come get me after." He looked at her for a moment. "Okay," he said. He went to the back room. Raymond Voss was 63 years old and looked like a man who had spent those years doing things that had left their record on his face, not in a violent way, but in the way of someone who had carried a specific weight for a very long time and had arranged his features around the carrying of it. He was sitting across from Priest with his hands folded on the table and the posture of a man who has decided he is going to say a difficult, true thing and intends to complete the saying of it, regardless of how it lands. Priest looked up when Cole came in. The look he gave Cole was the look he reserved for information he had not yet processed into a response. "Sit down," Priest said. Cole sat. Raymond Voss looked at him. "You're Cole Maddox." "Yes." "Derek told me about you. He said you were the one he'd have to watch out for." Raymond's voice was dry and tired, and completely without the drama the evening seemed to call for. He wasn't wrong. "Where is Derek?" Cole said. By now, Raymond looked at his folded hands. "He's on a highway heading south. He's going to cross into Mexico before morning if nobody stops him, and I'm going to tell you right now that stopping him is the least important thing that needs to happen tonight." "Mr. Voss, I know what my son did." Raymond said it the way people say things they've been rehearsing, not because the words are hard, but because the truth behind them is, and the rehearsal is the only way to get through the truth without stopping. "He called me 3 days ago. He said he was in trouble and he needed to talk to someone who wouldn't ask him to explain everything from the beginning." Raymond paused. "I'm the only person left who knows his beginning." The room was quiet. Priest said, "Tell us," Raymond Voss told them. 8 months ago, Derek had been approached not by Victor Cross directly, but by a man working as an intermediary. A connection Derek had made through a legitimate business contact, someone who seemed on the surface to be exactly what he presented himself as. Over the course of 4 meetings, Derek had been slowly walked into a corner, first offered money for minor information, then given enough of that money that the receiving of it became its own evidence. And then when the evidence existed, offered a choice between cooperation and exposure. It was not seduction. It was not ideology. It was a trap built from Derek's own greed and then sprung with the specific patience of people who are very good at building traps. "He didn't want to betray the club," Raymond said. "I want to be very clear that I'm not asking you to believe he's a good man. He's not. But he's not a man who woke up 8 months ago and decided to sell his brothers. He's a man who made a small bad choice and got walked into a catastrophic one. That's a distinction without much difference for the people who got walked into it with him," Priest said. "I know." Raymond didn't argue it, "but it matters for what you do next." "Why?" Cole said. Raymond looked at him. "Because Victor Cross didn't come to Red Hollow for your territory or your routes or anything Derek promised. Those were the pretext. Cross came because there are 2 men in your chapter who have information about a federal investigation that went wrong 4 years ago, Information that Cross needs buried because the men who conducted that investigation are now the men protecting his organization. He unfolded his hands, put them flat on the table. Derek didn't know that when they recruited him. He found out 6 weeks ago. That's when he called me. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence from anything the room had held before. Cole looked at Priest. Priest's face was doing nothing visible, which was how Cole knew that internally it was doing everything at once. "Which two men?" Priest said. Raymond looked at him steadily. "You and Leon." Cole heard Boone behind him exhale. 4 years ago, Raymond said, there was a federal task force operating in this region. It was investigating organizations, not your club specifically, but adjacent organizations that your club had been brought into proximity with. The investigation was corrupted. 2 of the federal agents involved made contact with a private organization to suppress certain findings. That organization is the one Victor Cross works for. The findings they suppressed involved financial crimes that would have dismantled Cross's entire network. He looked at Priest. The agents who suppressed it knew your club had documentation of that meeting. Photographs of recording, something a member of this chapter collected 4 years ago while doing completely unrelated business. Priest was quiet for a long time. "Leon," he said finally, "your member doesn't even know what he has," Raymond said. Or didn't until 3 weeks ago when Cross's people started moving. Derek figured out what Cross actually wanted when he intercepted a communication that wasn't meant for him. At that point, he understood that he hadn't sold his club's routes. He had sold them access to the people who could testify about what the documentation shows. Cole stood up. "Where's Leon?" he said, and his voice came out quieter than he intended, which was the voice he used when something became very urgent, very quickly. "Outside," Boone said. Cole moved to the door, opened. It looked out. Leon was standing 20 feet away on the porch, phone to his ear, speaking to someone with his back to the house. He wasn't talking to anyone Cole recognized the number of. "Leon," Cole said. Leon turned. Cole saw it on his face immediately, not guilt, which he'd expected, but something worse. Relief. The exhausted, terrible relief of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just realized that the carrying is almost over. "How long?" Cole said. Leon ended the call. He put his phone in his pocket. He looked at Cole with the eyes of someone who has decided that honesty is the only thing he has left to offer. 3 weeks, Leon said. "They came to me 3 weeks ago. I didn't know what they wanted at first. I thought it was about the recording. I thought if I kept them talking, kept telling them I needed time, you'd find the note before they made their move." "You knew about the note," Cole said. "I knew someone was going to send a warning into the bar. I didn't know who or how. I just knew they were going to move on Derek when he arrived, and I knew that if Derek got spooked before we could document what he'd done, he'd run and Cross would have his next move." "Who were you just on the phone with?" Leon looked at him. "A federal contact, not one of theirs. Someone who's been building a case against Cross's organization for 2 years. The porch was very quiet. "You've been working with a federal agent," Cole said, "for 3 weeks, unofficial. Nothing that touches the club in any formal way." Leon's voice was steady. "I needed time to copy the documentation Cross wanted destroyed and get it somewhere safe before they made their move. Tonight was them making their move." Cole stared at him. "Leon," he said, "I know. You should have told Priest. I know. 3 weeks ago, you should have walked into that back room and told Priest everything. I know." Leon looked at him without flinching. "And if I had, Derek would have heard about it within 48 hours and Cross's people would have moved immediately and the documentation would have disappeared before we could make copies. I needed them to believe they still had time." He paused. "I needed tonight to happen the way it happened." Cole looked at him for a long moment. "The documentation," he said. "Where is it?" "Copied and in 3 locations. My federal contact has one set. A lawyer I trust has another. The third?" Leon almost smiled. "The third is in the kitchen inside a coffee can in the back of Martha's pantry where it has been for 4 years because that is where I put things I need to not lose." Cole almost said something. He didn't. He went back inside through the hallway, through the kitchen, where Claire looked up at him from the table with the focused attention of someone who has been listening to muffled voices through a wall and has constructed most of the story from tone and timing alone. Third shelf, Leon called from the doorway. Behind the decaf. Martha, without a word, went to the pantry. She came back with a coffee can that had been sealed with electrical tape. She set it on the table. Claire looked at it. She looked at Cole. "What is that?" she said. "The reason all of this happened," Cole said. He opened the can. Inside, wrapped in a dry cleaning bag, was a small external hard drive and a folded photograph, 8 by 10, slightly yellowed at the edges, showing two men in suits shaking hands with a third man at a restaurant table. The third man's face was turned toward the camera at an angle that was clearly unintentional, clearly not posed. The face of someone who did not know he was being photographed. Cole held up the photograph. He looked at it. He had never seen the two men in suits. But the man shaking their hands, the third man, the one who didn't know he was in the frame, was a face he had seen before and recently, and not in a restaurant. He had seen it in a bar, 19 feet from the corner table where he'd been sitting. It was Derek Voss. Not the Derek Voss Cole knew, not the Derek of the new watch and the off-screen texts and the too loud laugh. This was a younger Derek with a younger face and a different posture, the posture of a man who doesn't yet know how to hide how important he thinks he is. And the men shaking his hand were wearing federal identification on lanyards around their necks. Cole set the photograph flat on the table. "Derek was already working with them," he said, 4 years ago. From the doorway, Leon said, "He was their asset then, not theirs yet, ours. He was supposed to be gathering information about the adjacent organizations I mentioned. He was working for the task force as an informant." The words sat in the room like something physical. "And when the task force got corrupted," Cole said slowly, "Derek was caught between them. He knew what they'd suppressed. He knew what he'd been used to document and then had that documentation disappeared. He knew what the photograph showed." Leon came fully into the kitchen. He had leverage. He just didn't know what to do with it. And eventually Cross found out he had it and offered him a way out, give Cross access to the club's structure, and the photograph disappears and Derek disappears with it. "Except he didn't give them access," Cole said. "He gave them the wrong man. He gave them my name," Priest said from the doorway. Everyone looked at him. Priest stepped into the kitchen. Raymond Voss was behind him and Boone behind Raymond, and the kitchen was suddenly very full of people who were all carrying the same weight of a situation that had just revealed its full shape. Priest looked at the photograph on the table. He looked at it for a long time. "Derek told them I had the documentation," Priest said. "He pointed at me. That's what the note meant. Not that someone sold me out to be harmed. It meant that someone had told Cross I was the man who could expose everything." He looked at Leon. "He pointed at me instead of you because he knew you were the one who actually had it, and he was trying to redirect them long enough to run." Leon met his eyes. "Yes. He was using me as a shield." "Yes." Priest looked at the photograph, at the hard drive, at the coffee can sitting open on Martha's kitchen table. "Is the evidence on that drive enough?" he said to Leon. "My contact says yes. Bank records communications, a second photograph, digital timestamped of the meeting where the suppression was agreed to, and 3 signed statements from people who were present." Priest nodded. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at Cole. "Victor Cross called you," he said. "He wants a meeting in 24 hours. Give him the meeting." Priest picked up the photograph from the table and held it with the care of someone handling something that is both fragile and very powerful. "Give him the meeting, and by the time he arrives, what's on that drive will be in the hands of people who cannot be pressured or bought, and Cross will walk into that meeting knowing it." "You want him to come knowing it's over," Cole said. "I want him to come knowing his protection is gone. I want him to make a choice, walk away, or push forward with nothing left to push with." Priest set the photograph down. "Cornered men make mistakes. I want to watch him make one." Cole looked at Claire. She'd been silent through all of it, sitting at the table with her cold coffee, listening with the same organized attention she brought to everything missing. Nothing filing, everything in the same precise mental order. She looked up at him. "The man in the gray suit," she said. "Cross's intermediary, the one who hired me." She paused. "He was Derek, wasn't he?" The room went quiet again. Cole looked at her. Then he looked at the photograph. The younger man's face, the posture of someone who believes he's invisible. He thought about the gray suit, the professional manner, the approach in the parking lot already knowing her name, The way he'd said she has an honest face, not a compliment, but a technical assessment, the way someone assesses a tool. He thought about the snake tattoo. Derek had a snake tattoo on his neck. She had given the note to the wrong man because the light was bad and she'd seen a tattoo from across the room and assumed. But what if the mistake wasn't hers? What if Derek had sent her to deliver the note to Cole, deliberately knowing in the bad lighting of the dust raven that Cole's eagle tattoo could be mistaken for something else? Knowing that a nervous waitress moving quickly might not check twice, and the whole thing had been constructed not as a delivery, but as a detonation. Send the note to Cole. Cole goes to the docks. Derek goes to the border. He knew you'd give it to me, Cole said. Claire stared at him. The bad light in that bar has been the same bad light for 20 years, Cole said. Derek has drunk in that bar for 11 of those years. He knew exactly what a person standing across that room would see when they looked at a man at the corner table. He looked at the photograph, at the younger face. He sent you to me on purpose. Then why the money, Claire said. Why pay me $300 for a delivery he was orchestrating? Because he needed you scared enough to do it and confident enough to look like you weren't. $300 is the exact amount of money that makes a person feel like they've been taken care of without making them feel like they're being paid for something serious. Cole looked at her. He knew what you needed. He'd been watching the bar. He knew I needed tuition money, Claire said flatly. Yes. She sat with that for a moment. Her expression didn't collapse into anger or tears or any of the things that would have been understandable. It did something quieter and in some ways more devastating. It became very still, the stillness of someone who has just understood the full shape of how they were used and is deciding what to do with that understanding. Okay, she said, just that. Cole looked at her. Okay, she said again. Then he made a mistake. Which one? She met his eyes. He chose me because he thought I was controllable. Because he thought I'd take the money and do what I was told and go home and not ask questions. She set her cold coffee mug down on the table with a small, deliberate click. He was wrong about all of it. Cole looked at her for a moment that held more weight than he expected. Yes, he said, he was. Outside in the dark, beyond the chapter house, the desert was quiet, the way it gets in the hours between midnight and dawn. Not peaceful exactly, but cleared of everything unnecessary, reduced to the things that matter and nothing else. Victor Cross was somewhere in that darkness with a phone and a plan and the still intact confidence of a man who believes he controls the shape of the night. He didn't. The shape of the night had changed in a kitchen over cold coffee when a waitress from Phoenix with $300 in her apron and a mistake on her conscience had decided that being used wrong was not the same thing as being powerless. And Cole Maddox, who had spent 14 years learning the difference between a fight worth having and one worth winning, had just understood something he hadn't known when the night started. The woman who accidentally delivered the wrong message had not started this. She was going to help finish it. The call to cross went out at 2:47 in the morning. Cole made it from the back room with Priest beside him and Jimmy standing at the door and the small external hard drive sitting on the table between them like a stone that had been dropped from a very great height and hadn't finished landing yet. Cross answered on the second ring. Mr. Maddox, he said, same voice, same controlled even temperature, the voice of a man who believed that composure was a form of superiority. The meeting, that Cole said? Tomorrow, noon, the Dust Raven. A pause. That's a public location. That's the point. Another pause longer this time. You're confident. I'm practical. Public locations mean neither of us does anything stupid. Cole kept his voice flat. You said you wanted one conversation. I'm offering it. Noon tomorrow at the bar where this started. Come alone or with one person. Those are the terms. And what are we discussing? What you actually came here for. Not what Derek told you you'd get. What actually exists and what it's actually worth. Cole paused. You've been chasing something for a long time, Cross. Tomorrow you find out what it really is. The silence this time was different. It was the silence of a man recalculating, not panicking, but adjusting the way a chess player adjusts when the board shows him something he didn't anticipate. Noon, Cross said. The Dust Raven. The line went dead. Priest looked at the phone in Cole's hand. He'll run a check tonight, Priest said. He'll try to find out what we have before morning. He won't find anything that helps him. Leon leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and the expression of a man who has spent 3 weeks being very careful about what was findable. What his people can access shows exactly what he expects it to show. The copies I made aren't anywhere his network can reach. The lawyer, Cole said, already has one set. She was notified an hour ago. Leon looked at the hard drive. The federal contact has the second set. The third ocarita is still in the coffee can, Martha said from the doorway, where she had been standing for the last 20 minutes, doing the thing she always did, being present and quiet and entirely aware of everything. I put it back. Priest almost smiled. It was the kind of almost smile that lives in the corner of a person's expression and doesn't quite make it all the way out. Good. Cole looked around the room at the faces, Priest Leon, Jimmy Boone, Raymond Voss, sitting in the corner like a man who has completed the thing he came to do and is waiting to be told what happens next. All of them carrying the night on their faces, all of them running on the particular fuel that kicks in when sleep is no longer an option and the work isn't finished. Go home, Priest said. What can be done tonight is done. Tomorrow we end this. The room began to move. Chairs pushed back, jackets picked up, the sounds of a long night winding down without quite being over. Raymond Voss stood. He looked at Priest across the room with the expression of a man who has more to say and has decided that tonight is not when he says it. Your son, Priest said before Raymond could move toward the door. Raymond stopped. He ran, Priest said. That's his choice, and I won't chase it tonight. But the running doesn't erase what he did, and it doesn't erase what he was before he did it. He held Raymond's gaze. 11 years. He was here for 11 years, and for 10 of those years, he was one of ours. I don't forget that. I also don't forget the last one. Raymond looked at him. I know, he said. The choice he has now, Priest said, is whether he keeps running or whether he comes back and does something with what he knows that might begin to account for it. That's not a decision I can make for him, Mom. But if he's still talking to you, Priest paused. Tell him the door is not permanently closed. Tell him that that's not a promise, it's an option. Raymond Voss nodded once. He left. The room emptied. Cole was the last one out, and on his way through the kitchen he stopped because Claire was still at the table, not waiting this time, but doing something at the table with her phone and a legal pad she'd found somewhere, writing things in the small, precise handwriting he'd seen on the receipt. She looked up. I'm making a list, she said. He sat down. Of what? Everything I remember about the man in the gray suit. Everything Cross said on the phone call. The exact words, the order, the pauses. She tapped the pad. You said I was an asset. I figured I should start acting like one. Cole looked at the legal pad. The list was organized by category, physical description, verbal patterns, specific phrases, timeline. It was the kind of document that had structure to it, the structure of someone who understood that detail was only useful if it was retrievable. You did this from memory, he said. I've been sitting here for 3 hours. I had time. She set the pen down. Cole, the meeting tomorrow. Cross is going to know something changed. You can't call a man at 3 a.m. and offer him a face-to-face and have him walk in thinking everything is normal. I don't want him thinking everything is normal. Then what do you want him thinking? Cole considered. I want him thinking he has one move left and that he needs to play it in person to know whether it works. And what move is that, me? Cole held her gaze. He's going to come to that meeting believing he can negotiate, that we have the documentation, but we're also sitting on 11 years of chapter history that a federal adjacent organization could make very complicated. He's going to come thinking it's a trade. We give him what Leon has. He makes certain things about this club's past disappear. He'll think that's still on the table. Is it? No. Does he know that? Not yet. Claire looked at him steadily. So you're giving him hope on purpose, letting him walk into that bar tomorrow, thinking there's still a negotiation to be had. Yes. And when he gets there, he finds out that what he thought he was trading for has already been delivered to people he can't pressure. Cole paused, and he makes a choice about who he is in a room full of people who are going to remember which choice he makes. Claire was quiet for a moment. That's not a fight, she said. No, that's a dismantling. Yes. She looked at her legal pad, at the list she'd been building from 3 hours of memory in a kitchen that smelled like strong coffee in the particular specific atmosphere of people who take serious things seriously. I want to be there, she said. Cole looked at her. I know what you're going to say, she said before he could say it. I know I'm not a member. I know I'm not protected under any formal structure, which is exactly what Cross said makes me exposed. I know tonight was already more than I signed up for. She met his eyes. But the man who decided to use me tonight made a calculation about what I was worth and what I would do with being used. I'd like to be in the room when he finds out how wrong that calculation was. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Martha said from somewhere behind the counter, without looking up from whatever she was doing, "Let the girl come." Cole didn't look at Martha. He looked at Claire. "You sit with Martha," he said, "at the bar. You don't engage with Cross directly unless I ask you to. If anything changes, you go out the back the way you came in." He paused. "And you wear something that isn't a uniform. You've spent enough of tonight looking like someone's waitress." Something moved across Claire's face that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite relief, but lived in the territory of both. "I don't have anything else," she said. "I haven't been home." Martha set something on the counter without comment, a folded denim jacket, dark blue soft from years of use. "It'll fit," she said. "Close enough." Claire looked at it. She looked at Cole. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll be there." Cole stood. He should go. There were 4 hours until dawn and approximately 90 minutes of sleep available in those 4 hours if he used them correctly, and tomorrow required a version of him that couldn't run on coffee and adrenaline alone. He picked up his jacket. "Claire," he said. She looked up. "What you did tonight, the call, the list, the information about the service road." He stopped, started again. "You didn't have to do any of it. You could have told me no at about 6 different points in the last 4 hours, and I couldn't have argued with you." He held her gaze. "I want you to know I see the difference between what you were asked to do and what you chose to do. Those aren't the same thing." Claire looked at him. "Neither are you," she said. He didn't ask her what she meant. He already knew. He left. The drive to his house took 11 minutes, and he spent most of it not thinking about Cross or Derek or the meeting at noon, because those things were set, and the set things didn't need more thought, they needed mourning. What he spent those 11 minutes thinking about without entirely deciding to was the way Claire had said come back earlier that night, and the way she'd looked up from her legal pad when he came into the kitchen, and the specific quality of the list she'd been making, the categories, the order, the detail. He thought about priests saying sometimes accidents are the only honest thing in a dishonest situation. He thought about the note folded in thirds. He slept for 93 minutes and woke up feeling like he'd slept for 8 hours, which was something his body did in high-stakes situations that he'd stopped questioning and started simply being grateful for. He was back at the chapter house by 7. Martha had breakfast on the table, and Claire was already up wearing Martha's denim jacket over her uniform, the legal pad in front of her with 3 more pages of notes added since last night. She had dark circles under her eyes that she hadn't had when he'd left, and her hair was down instead of pulled back. And she looked up when he came in with the same focused attention she'd brought to every single moment of the night, undiminished. "Shepard called," she said, "at 6:30. He said to tell you he finished the account review and he wants to talk to you before noon." Cole sat down. Martha put coffee in front of him, strong enough to constitute a threat the way Martha's coffee always was. "Shepard finds something." He said 8 months of transactions. 43 separate withdrawals that trace to a routing number he's now connected to a shell company registered in Nevada with a Phoenix mailing address. She turned the legal pad toward him. She'd transcribed the relevant details in the same organized columns. The shell company's registered agent is a man named Gordon Fitch. The address is a UPS store. Cole looked at the notes, then at her. "Shepard told you all that at 6:30 in the morning," he said. "He thought he was leaving a voicemail." "A beat." I answered. Cole almost smiled. "And you wrote it down?" "I wrote everything down." She pulled the pad back. "Gordon Fitch shows up twice in the federal case documentation that Leon's contact sent over. He's the intermediary who first approached Derek. He's also the registered agent on 2 other shell companies connected to Cross Meridian's financial network." Cole was quiet for a moment. "You read the federal documentation," he said. "Leon's contact sent it as an attachment." Martha's laptop was open. She looked at him with the absolute honesty of someone who had stopped apologizing for her own competence sometime in the last 4 hours. "I read it," I took notes. I found two things that I don't think anyone has connected yet. Tell me. First, Cross Meridian's financial network runs through 7 shell companies. Gordon Fitch is the registered agent for 3 of them. The other 4 are registered to a woman named Sandra Voss. She let that sit. Derek's mother. Cole set his coffee down. Derek's family is inside the financial structure, he said. Which means Cross has leverage on Raymond too. Which is why Raymond came here last night, not just because his son called him, because Cross told him to. She looked at him. I think Raymond Voss was sent here to assess what we have, not to help us. Cole thought about the way Raymond had sat in the back room. The folded hands, the careful voice, the things he'd revealed, and more importantly, the order in which he'd revealed them, building toward the photograph, toward Leon, toward the documentation as if he was following a map. He didn't know about the coffee can, Cole said. No, he found out the same time everyone else did. His reaction was real. She paused. But what he told you about Derek, the trap, the coercion, the 8-month timeline, I think that was true and also incomplete. I think Derek went into this more willingly than Raymond said. I think Raymond knows that and is trying to manage the version of events that exists. Why? Because Sandra Voss's name on those shell companies means she's exposed. And protecting her is the only reason Raymond would walk into this chapter house. Claire looked at him steadily. He loves his son, but he came here for his wife. Cole sat with that for a long moment. Outside, the desert morning was doing what desert mornings do, coming in hot and clear, and without any of the mercy that night, sometimes provides the full flat honesty of light that hides nothing. You got all of this from a 6:30 voicemail and a federal document on Martha's laptop, Cole said. In 3 hours of not sleeping, she picked up her coffee. I'm a nursing student, Cole. We learn to find critical information fast and organize it so someone can act on it. That's the entire skill. She paused. I'm just applying it to different charts. Cole looked at her. He thought not for the first time and with more clarity than before that Derek Voss had made a catastrophic miscalculation when he'd chosen Claire Whitmore as his delivery mechanism. Not because she'd given the note to the wrong man that had been the intended result, but because Derek had assumed that the end of her usefulness was the end of her involvement, and he had been so wrong about that assumption that the wrongness of it was now the load-bearing wall of everything about to happen at noon. I need to call Priest, Cole said. I know. She slid the legal pad across the table toward him. Take the notes. He took them. He went to the back room and called Priest and laid out what Claire had found in the same way he laid out everything for Priest in order without editorializing. When he finished, there was a silence that had a specific quality to it. The Voss family is in the financial structure, Priest said. Sandra Voss's name is on 4 shell companies. Raymond came here to find out what we have. That's Claire's red. I think she's right. A pause. The girl has good instincts. Yes. Use them. Priest was quiet for a moment. Call Raymond before noon. Tell him we know about Sandra. Don't threaten. Don't negotiate. Just tell him we know, and that what happens to Sandra's name depends entirely on how this meeting goes. You want to give him something to do with what he learned last night, Cole said. I want to give him a reason to make Derek come back. Priest paused. And I want Cross walking into that bar, knowing that every piece of leverage he thought he had has already been named. Cole called Raymond Voss at 8:15. Raymond answered on the 3rd ring with the voice of a man who had not slept. We know about Sandra, Cole said. No preamble, no buildup. The silence that followed had a specific texture, the texture of a trap snapping shut around something that had been trying very hard to stay invisible. Cole, I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to tell you that what happens to her name in the documentation depends on noon today. Cross walks into that bar knowing his network is already exposed. Everyone cooperates with what comes next, and Sandra Voss stays in the private category. Cole paused. Or this gets complicated for people who didn't choose to be in it. Raymond's breathing was audible for a moment. Derek would have to come back, Raymond said quietly. Derek would have to come back, give a formal account of the 8 months, and cooperate with Leon's federal contact. That's the offer. One time this morning, it expires at 11. Another silence. He's south of Tucson, Raymond said. I know. He's not Cole. He's not going to be easy to convince. Tell him about Sandra. Cole's voice was level. Tell him the running stops protecting her at noon and starts costing her. That'll be enough. He ended the call. He went back to the kitchen. Claire was on her second cup of coffee and had started a new page of notes. Martha was at the stove doing something that smelled like breakfast food and also like the specific act of giving people something to do while their hands wanted to shake. Raymond will call Derek, Cole said. Claire looked up. Will he come back? I think so. Cole sat down. The question is whether he comes back in time for it to matter or after, when the account he has to give is the only thing left to give. And if he comes back after what would happen? Then we hear him out and we decide. Same as anything. He looked at her. You should eat something and it's going to be a long morning. I've been awake for, she stopped, counted, 22 hours. I know, eat anyway. Martha put a plate in front of each of them without being asked. They ate. It was the most normal thing that had happened since 11:45 the previous night, and it was so normal that it almost felt wrong. Two people sitting at a kitchen table in the morning, eating scrambled eggs, while a woman named Martha moved around the kitchen with the ease of someone who has fed people through bad situations before and understands that feeding people is itself a form of care. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Yes. Last night when you read the note, she looked at him across the table. What did you think about first, not the club, not the plan, not what it meant strategically? What did you actually think in that first second? Cole was quiet for a moment. It was a specific kind of question, the kind that doesn't want a tactical answer, that is specifically requesting the thing underneath the tactic, the human thing that exists before the training kicks in. I thought about what it counted, he said, to be someone's price, to be the thing that gets traded without anyone asking you. He picked up his fork, set it back down. I've watched that happen to people. I've watched it happen inside this chapter and outside it. Someone decides what you're worth without consulting you, and then they build a transaction around that number, and by the time you find out you've been priced, the sale is already in progress. He looked at her. The note made me angry, not strategically angry, actually angry. Claire looked at him. Me too, she said quietly. When I understood what the man in the gray suit actually did, choosing me specifically, knowing what I needed using it, I wasn't scared anymore after I understood that. I was angry. She paused. Angry is easier to work with. Yes, Cole said. It is. The morning moved. Shepard arrived at 9 with a printed summary of the account documentation. Leon's federal contact, a woman named Reyes, whom Cole spoke to on the phone for 12 focused minutes, confirmed that the copies were secured and that she had begun the formal process of submitting them to the oversight body that Cross's protection couldn't reach. Jimmy called from outside to say that 2 of Cross's vehicles had been spotted moving through Red Hollow, not toward the chapter house, just moving the way people move when they're trying to understand the shape of a place before they have to sit in it. At 10:43, Cole's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. It's me. Derek Voss's voice was different from the voice of the man who'd laughed too loud at the joke about informants. It was thinner, more honest. The voice of someone who has been in a car for 6 hours with their own decisions and has run out of ways to arrange those decisions into a shape that looks better than it is. I'm 40 minutes out. Cole was very still. Come to the chapter house, he said, not the bar. Cole, Derek. His voice was even, not warm, not cold, the particular temperature of someone who has moved past the anger and arrived at something more durable. Come to the house. Talk to Priest. Do it before you lose the window. A silence. Is there actually a window? Derek said. There's one. It's closing. Cole paused. Your mother's name is in the documentation. You know what that means. The silence was different this time. 40 minutes, Derek said. I'll be here. He ended the call and looked across the room at Claire, who had heard every word and was watching him with the steady attention she brought to things she needed to understand completely. He's coming back, she said. Yes. How is Priest gonna handle that? Cole thought about Priest at the table last night, looking at the photograph at the hard drive at 11 years of a man's membership compressed into the specific moment of its failure. The almost smile when Martha said she'd put the coffee can back. The same way he handles everything, Cole said, completely. At 11:28, Derek Voss walked through the front door of the Red Hollow chapter house, for the first time since he'd stood at the gate of the East Freight Terminal and confirmed a position that was meant to end the people inside. He looked like a man who had driven 400 miles in the wrong direction and turned around. He looked like someone who had run and discovered that running is only geography, that the thing you're running from doesn't stay at the address you left it. He stopped when he saw Cole. Cole stood in the hallway and looked at him. "You sent her to me," Cole said, on purpose. Derek didn't deny it. He looked at Cole with the eyes of a man who is finished with the performance of a version of himself that no longer applies. "I needed you to find the note before the night went wrong. If I gave it to myself, if the note arrived the way Cross planned, I had no move. They'd have confirmation that I read it, and they'd know I knew, and they'd accelerate. I needed the note to go wrong." "You needed me," Cole said. "No. Yes. You used her to get to me." Derek looked at the floor, then back up. "Yes, I know what that is." "Does she know you know her name?" A pause. "I've been to the Dust Raven. I know everyone who works there." Cole looked at him for a long, even moment. "Priest is in the back room," he said. "You don't stop. You don't explain. You don't prepare a version. You go in there and you tell him everything from the beginning. Real beginning." He stepped aside. "After that, whatever happens is between you and him. You understand?" Derek nodded. He walked past Cole toward the back room. He stopped at the door and turned back once. "The girl," he said. She's fine," Cole said. "No thanks to how you used her, but she's fine." Derek looked at him. "I picked her because I thought she was strong enough to handle it," he said. "I know that's not the same as asking." "No," Cole said. "It's not." Derek went into the back room. Cole stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he walked back to the kitchen where Claire was sitting with Martha and a legal pad full of notes in the denim jacket that didn't belong to her. And she looked up at him when he came in, and he looked back at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because sometimes the specific silence between two people who have been through a long night together is more honest than anything words can carry. "He came back," she said finally. "Yes." "Does that change anything?" Cole thought about it, about Derek in the back room with Priest, about Raymond Voss and Sandra's name in the shell companies, and the photograph that had been in a coffee can for 4 years, waiting to become relevant. About Leon and the federal contact named Reyes and the documentation in 3 locations that Cross couldn't reach. About a folded note that had gone to the wrong man and started the unraveling of a betrayal that had been 8 months in the building. "It changes what's possible," Cole said, "not what happened." Claire nodded. She picked up the pen. She turned to a new page on the legal pad. "Then we go to the bar at noon," she said, "and we finish it." At 11:58, Cole Maddox walked into the Dust Raven Tavern for the first time since the previous night, and the bar looked exactly the same as it always looked, the same bad light, the same worn surfaces, the same jukebox sitting silent in the corner. The morning shift waitress was behind the bar, and she looked at him with the expression that the Dust Raven staff reserved for Hell's Angels members, which was awareness and professional blankness in equal measure. Priest was already at the corner table, Leon beside him, Jimmy near the door. Martha and Claire were at the bar, 2 stools, 2 coffees, exactly where Cole had placed them. Cross walked in at 12:01. He was alone the way Cole had asked. He wore a different suit from the one Derek had worn in the parking lot, darker, better cut, the suit of a man who understands that appearance is information. He looked around the room with the steady, unhurried assessment of someone who has walked into rooms like this before and made them go the way he needed them to go. His eyes found Cole. He came to the table. He sat. He looked at Priest, at Leon, at Cole. "You brought company," he said. "So did you," Cole said. "You just left them in the car." Cross almost smiled. "Precautions." "Sure." Cole put both hands flat on the table. "I'm going to tell you what today is. Today is the day you find out that the thing you came to Red Hollow to acquire has already been delivered to people you cannot touch. Today is the day you find out that your organization's financial structure has been fully documented and submitted to an oversight body that your federal contacts cannot reach, because the documentation of what those contacts did is part of the same submission." He paused. "And today is the day you make a choice about which version of yourself you walk out of this building as." Cross looked at him. His composure was intact. The face was still arranged into the expression of someone managing a situation rather than being managed by one. But his hands, Cole noticed, had moved. They were in his lap now, not visible. You're confident? Cross said. I'm done, Cole said. There's a difference. Confident means I still think there's something to fight about. Done means I'm just telling you what already happened. And if I don't accept what already happened, then you leave this bar and spend the next 72 hours finding out from other people exactly what I just told you. And by that time, the process is further along and your options are fewer. Cole held his gaze. I'm not offering you a deal, Cross. I'm giving you the courtesy of telling you in person because this started in this room and I thought it should end here too. Cross looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the bar, at Martha, who was drinking her coffee and looking at nothing in particular, at Claire sitting beside her in a denim jacket that wasn't hers, her legal pad closed on the bar in front of her, her eyes meeting Cross's with the particular steadiness of someone who has made a decision and is not reconsidering it. The waitress, Cross said. Her name is Claire Whitmore, Cole said. She's not part of any transaction you were attempting to make. She was a person you chose to use, and she's the reason your plan failed, and she did it without knowing any of what she was walking into. He paused. I want you to know that. I want you to understand exactly how your operation unraveled. Cross looked at Claire for a moment. Claire looked back. She didn't look away. Cross looked back at Cole. This is finished, Cross said. Yes, Cole said. It is. Cross stood. He adjusted his jacket with the precise, unhurried motion of a man who refuses to let the room see him hurry. He looked at Priest once, a look that had more in it than words would have held, the specific look of one person acknowledging to another that a contest has concluded, and the conclusion was not what they intended. Priest looked back with the absolute stillness of a man who has been through this before and has stopped finding it interesting. Cross walked out. The door swung shut behind him. The bar was quiet for a moment. Then Jimmy said from near the door, his guys in the car left with him. Cole let out a slow breath. Martha set her coffee cup down. And Claire Whitmore, sitting at the bar in a borrowed jacket with a legal pad full of notes she'd made through a night she hadn't planned and a morning she hadn't expected, looked at Cole Maddox across the room, and something in her expression did what her expression had been carefully not doing for the last 12 hours. It let go. Not completely. Not dramatically. Just the small, careful release of someone who has been holding a position for a very long time and has just been given permission to breathe. Cole crossed the room. He sat on the bar stool beside her. It's over, she said. The cross part, he said. Yes. She looked at him. There are other parts. There are always other parts. He looked at the bar in front of them, the worn surface, the ring stains, the particular texture of a place that has absorbed a long time's worth of human weight. But the other parts don't require you to be in them. You can walk out of this bar today and go back to your life. And Cole, he stopped. She turned it on the bar stool to face him directly. Do you actually want me to walk out of this bar and go back to my life? He looked at her. The honest answer was no, and they both knew it was no, and the knowing of it had been building since the moment she'd said come back with the specific weight of someone who intended to be there when he did. No, he said. Then stop offering, she said. It's the fourth time. He looked at her. I'm counting, she said. Martha from 2 stools over said, good Lord, finally into her coffee cup. Cole looked at Martha. Martha looked at her coffee. Claire looked at the bar, and the very edge of a real smile moved across her face for the first time since a man in a gray suit had said her name in a parking lot and handed her $300 and started the longest night of her life. What happens now? She said. Cole looked at the bar around them, at the bad light and the worn surfaces in the same corner table where he'd unfolded a note that was meant for someone else and read words that changed the shape of everything that followed. Now, he said, we figure out what you want, not what Cross wanted, not what Derek planned, not what anybody else decided about you before you knew they were deciding. He looked at her. What do you want, Claire? She was quiet for a moment. I want to finish nursing school, she said. I want to do something with the part of me that knows how to find what matters in a situation and organize it so someone can act on it. I want to, she stopped. I want to not be someone's tool again, someone's delivery mechanism, someone's calculation. Okay. And I want to know what this is. She looked at him directly. Whatever this has been since that table last night. I want to know what it is. Cole looked at her for a moment. Something worth finding out, he said. It was not a romantic answer. It was not a promise made in the heat of a night that had burned too hot for promises to mean what they should. It was an honest answer from a man who had spent 14 years learning that honesty was the only currency that didn't devalue in a crisis. Claire looked at him. Okay, she said. Outside, the desert sun was doing what it does, burning away everything that the night had left behind, clear and flat and without negotiation, the full, honest light of a day that had no interest in the difficulty of what came before it. Victor Cross drove south. Derek Voss sat in the back room of the chapter house and told Priest the real beginning. 3 weeks after Victor Cross walked out of the Dust Raven and drove south and didn't come back, the federal oversight body formally announced the opening of an investigation into the financial network connected to Cross Meridian. Leon's contact agent Reyes called Cole on a Tuesday morning to tell him and Cole listened to the whole thing standing in the parking lot of a hardware store squinting into the Arizona sun, and when she finished he said thank you and ended the call and stood there for a moment doing nothing at all. Just breathing. The way you breathe when something you've been braced for stops being necessary. He called Priest. Priest answered on the first ring the way he always did because Priest treated his phone like a tool, and tools were not things you made wait. Reyes called, Cole said. I know. She called me first. A pause. It's moving. Yes. Cross's federal contacts are being reviewed. The 2 agents in the photograph are on administrative leave pending the investigation. Another pause shorter. Cole. Yeah. You did good work. Priest said it the way he said everything directly without decoration, as a statement of observed fact rather than a performance of sentiment. The girl did good work. Cole looked at the hardware store parking lot and thought about Claire at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning with a legal pad full of organized notes that she'd built from memory and nothing else. Yes, she did. How is she starting her clinical rotation next month? Cole paused. She got the program, full enrollment. A silence. The tuition, Priest said. She said no 3 times. In the 4th, she said she'd accept it as a loan with a formal repayment schedule and a signed agreement. Priest made a sound that in a less controlled man would have been a laugh. She made you sign a repayment schedule. With terms, Cole said. She brought the document herself. This time Priest actually laughed, a short, genuine sound that Cole had heard maybe a dozen times in 14 years, and that meant something each time. Good, he said. That's good. He paused. Bring her to the chapter dinner. Martha's been asking. I'll ask her. Don't ask. Tell her Martha's been asking. She'll come for Martha. Cole didn't argue with that because it was accurate. He ended the call and went into the hardware store and bought the thing he'd come for, and on the drive back, he thought about the 3 weeks that had passed since the morning in the Dust Raven, the specific texture of those weeks, the way they'd been both slower and faster than the night that preceded them. Derek Voss had spent 4 days in the back room with Priest and Leon, and eventually Agent Reyes giving the full account that Cole had told him to give from the real beginning. Cole hadn't been present for most of it. He'd been present for the opening when Derek had sat down across from Priest and looked at him with the face of a man who has stopped trying to manage what he looks like, and Priest had looked back with the face of a man who has already decided what he thinks and is now simply listening to confirm it, and Derek had said, I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix anything. I'm saying it because it's true, not because I expect it to do anything. Priest had said, start from the beginning, and Derek had. What came out over those 4 days was not the story of a man who had decided to betray his club. It was the story of a man who had made a sequence of small bad choices, each one made possible by the previous one, until the choices had accumulated into something he couldn't see around. Cole had heard versions of this story before it was the story of most betrayals, when you got close enough to see the actual shape of them. Not dramatic, not ideological. Just a man who wanted things he shouldn't have reached for and reached anyway. And by the time he understood where reaching had brought him, the only exit available was deeper in. That didn't make it better. It made it more human, which was its own complicated thing to sit with. The outcome for Derek was decided between Priest and Reyes in a conversation Cole was not part of and did not ask about. What he knew was that Derek was not in Mexico and was not in the custody of anyone who wished him permanent harm, and that the formal cooperation he'd given in those 4 days was part of a legal process that would define the next several years of his life in ways that were not comfortable but were survivable. Raymond Voss had called Cole once 2 weeks after. He hadn't said much. Mostly he'd just confirmed that Derek was okay and that Sandra's name had been handled the way Cole had said it would be handled. And then he'd said thank you in the voice of a man who has more to say and understands that this is not when he says it. Cole had said, tell him to do the work. Raymond had said, I will. That had been the end of that call. It was Shepard who finally found the full picture of what Derek had taken from the chapter accounts, not 43 withdrawals as the first review suggested, but 61 stretching back further than 8 months to a period that predated Cross Meridian entirely and suggested that Derek's willingness to be recruited had not been entirely a surprise to the person doing the recruiting. The total was not a number Cole was going to say out loud in any context, but it was a number that Priest looked at for a long time before setting the paper down and saying nothing. What Priest said eventually was, we rebuild. We've done it before. And that was the end of that conversation. The investigation into Cross Meridian moved the way federal investigations move, with the particular slowness of a process that is being done correctly, which is the only pace Cole trusted. Reyes had called 3 times in 3 weeks each time with a specific question that had a specific answer in the documentation Leon had preserved, and each time Cole had gotten her the answer within an hour. The process was working. The documentation was holding. The 2 agents on administrative leave had, according to a source Jimmy had, that Cole didn't ask about already begun exploring cooperation agreements of their own. Victor Cross, as of Reyes' Tuesday call, was in federal custody, pending a hearing that was going to be substantially informed by everything in the coffee can that had been in the back of Martha's pantry for 4 years. Cole drove home and thought about none of this. He thought about Claire. He thought about the way she'd looked at him in the bar 3 weeks ago when he'd said something worth finding out, and the way she'd said, okay, with a specific weight of someone who means the word entirely. He thought about the Tuesday they'd driven out to the edge of town and sat on the hood of his truck, and she'd told him about her mother in Phoenix, who had called when the program acceptance came through, and cried on the phone in a way that Claire had described with the careful brevity of someone protecting something they don't want to handle roughly. He thought about the way she'd organized everything, the notes, the documentation, the formal repayment schedule with terms, and the way that organization was not a distance but a kind of honesty, the honesty of someone who does not perform their feelings but does not hide them either. He thought about what Priest had said that first night. Sometimes accidents are the only honest thing in a dishonest situation. He pulled into the parking lot of the chapter house and sat in the truck for a moment before going in. Martha was inside because Martha was always inside, and beside her, at the kitchen table, was Claire, who was not always inside, but was inside today with her nursing textbook open and a pen in her hand and the look of someone deep in the specific concentration of learning something that matters. She looked up when he came in. Reyes called, she said. You heard already. Jimmy texted. She set the pen down. It's moving. Yes. Cross is in custody. Yes. She looked at him steadily. In 3 weeks, she had not shifted from the particular quality of attention she brought to things. It was still there, still the same organized, focused presence that had built a list from memory at 3 a.m. and found Sandra Voss's name in a financial document on a borrowed laptop before 7. It was simply directed now at different things, at the textbook, at the clinical rotation that started next month, at the specific future she was building with the same precision she brought to everything. How do you feel, she said. Cole sat down. He considered the question the way he considered things that required honesty fully without looking for the comfortable version. Like something got finished, he said. Not fixed, finished. Those aren't the same. No, she agreed. They're not. Martha set 2 cups of coffee on the table without comment. Cole looked at his and thought about the first cup of coffee he'd seen Claire holding the cold mug in the kitchen at 1 a.m. 2 hands wrapped around it, her face doing the careful work of staying composed in a situation that had given composure very little to work with. The chapter dinner, he said. Saturday, Martha wants you there. Claire looked at Martha. Martha looked at the stove. Martha more Claire said, do you want me there? I've been cooking for the same 40 people for 11 years, Martha said without turning around. New faces are welcome. Claire looked at Cole. She wants me there, Claire said. Yes. Then I'll be there. Cole nodded. He picked up the coffee. The kitchen was quiet in the particular way that kitchens get quiet when the people in them have been through something together and no longer need to fill the space between them with explanation. Then Claire said, "There's something I want to tell you." Cole looked at her. She closed the textbook. She set both hands flat on the table in the way she did when she was about to say something she had organized carefully and intended to say accurately. When the man in the gray suit, Derek, when he came to me in that parking lot and handed me $300, I told myself it was just a delivery. Simple transaction. Take the money, do the thing, go home. She looked at him. But I knew it wasn't simple. I knew from the first second it wasn't simple, and I did it anyway because I wanted the money more than I wanted to be honest with myself about what the situation was. Cole was quiet. "I'm not saying that to punish myself," she said. "I'm saying it because I think you deserve to know that I wasn't entirely innocent in how that night started. I made a choice. It was a bad choice. Everything that came after was different. I didn't choose any of that. But the first part was mine." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" he said. "Because this, whatever this is between us, I don't want it built on a version of me that's cleaner than I actually am." She met his eyes directly. "I want you to know the real beginning, the same way you asked Derek to tell a priest the real beginning." Cole held her gaze. He thought about the real beginning of his own story, the parts of it that he hadn't told anyone, and didn't intend to the choices he'd made before the training kicked in, the things he'd reached for before he understood what reaching cost. Everybody had a real beginning that was more complicated than the story they led with. That wasn't a defect. That was the condition of being a person who had actually lived something. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "You knew. I knew the night of." Someone who was purely innocent in a situation doesn't move the way you moved, doesn't ask the questions you asked, doesn't make the call without needing 30 minutes to think about it. He set down the coffee. "You'd been in a compromised position before you walked into that bar, and you'd made the best choice available with the options in front of you, and when the options changed, you changed with them. That's not guilt. That's just a person." Claire looked at him. Something in her face did what it had done in the bar when Cross walked out, the small, careful release of something held for too long. "You could have led with that," she said. "You needed to say it first," he said. "There's a difference." Martha from the stove very quietly. "Lord." Cole looked at Martha. "I'm invisible," Martha said. "Ignore me. Continue." Claire laughed. It was a real laugh. Sudden and unguarded, the laugh of someone who has been holding composure so long that when it releases completely, and the sound of it moved through the kitchen and did something to the specific weight of the morning that nothing else could have done. Cole looked at her laughing and felt something settle in him. Not the settling of a threat removed or a situation resolved. The settling of something that was moving toward its right shape slowly and with effort, the way real things do. He picked up his coffee. "Saturday," he said. "Chapter dinner, 6 o'clock. "I'll be there," Claire said. "Bring the textbook if you have studying to do. Martha won't mind." "I won't," Martha confirmed. Claire looked at the closed textbook in front of her, at the pen beside it, at the coffee cup in the kitchen and the particular quality of the morning in a room she hadn't known existed 4 weeks ago. "Cole," she said. "Yeah. Thank you for not leaving me in that parking lot." He looked at her. "You would have figured it out," he said. "Maybe," she paused. "But I'm glad I didn't have to." He nodded once. He stood, picked up his jacket, and headed for the door that led to the rest of the chapter house and the rest of the day and whatever needed doing in it. At the door, he stopped. He didn't turn around. "Claire." "Yeah." "The repayment schedule." He paused. "The terms you set, 3 years. That's standard for a loan of that." "I'm not arguing the terms." He paused. "I'm saying 3 years is a long time to be in regular contact with someone." A beat of silence. "That's the point," she said. He walked out. Martha waited exactly 4 seconds. "Finally," she said, and turned back to the stove. The chapter dinner on Saturday had 42 people, which was more than usual. And the room was loud in the way that rooms get loud when people inside them feel that something has been survived and are celebrating the surviving of it without calling it a celebration. Martha had cooked for 3 days. The table was full in a way that suggested abundance rather than excess, which was a distinction Martha understood in practice without naming. Claire came at 5:58, which was 2 minutes early, and exactly what Cole had expected. And she came in wearing something that wasn't a uniform and wasn't Martha's jacket, and was simply her own, a dark green dress with the kind of quiet confidence in its simplicity that belonged to someone who had stopped performing other people's versions of herself. She sat between Martha and a man named Shepard, who immediately began explaining the chapter's financial restructuring to her in the tone of someone who has been waiting to tell someone competent about it, and she listened with her whole attention and asked two questions that made Shepard stop mid-sentence and look at her with the expression of someone recalibrating their expectations upward. Cole watched from across the room. Jimmy appeared beside him. "She's going to restructure our entire bookkeeping system by March," Jimmy said. "Probably," Cole said. "Is that a problem?" Cole looked at Claire, who was now asking Shepard a third question that had made Shepard reach for a napkin to write something on. "No," Cole said. "It's not." Priest came to stand beside Cole at some point in the evening. Not announced, just present the way Priest was present at things fully and without needing to perform the fullness. He looked at the room for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "She's good for us." Cole said, "I know. I'm not talking about the bookkeeping." Cole looked at him. Priest looked back with the eyes of a man who has watched things for 19 years and has learned the specific look of something that has arrived at its right place. "She reminded us what we're protecting," Priest said. "Not the territory, not the reputation." He looked at the room at Shepard and his napkin at Martha, moving through the crowd with the ease of a woman in her right place at Leon and Boone and Jimmy, and all the rest of them, 42 people in a room that had come very close to being something less than it was. "People," he said. "We're protecting people." Cole was quiet for a moment. "She'd say she was just doing what was in front of her," he said. "Most important things get done that way," Priest said. He moved away into the room. Cole stood where he was. Later, when the dinner was winding down and the table was mostly cleared and the room had settled into the quieter key of people who have eaten well and said what needed saying and are now simply present with each other, Cole found Claire at the end of the table with her nursing textbook open. She had brought it because he'd told her she could, because she had studying to do, because she was a person who used her time, and she looked up when he sat down beside her. "Good night," he said. "Better than my last one here," she said. "Lower bar." Significantly. She looked at the textbook, then at him. "Shepard wants to digitize 10 years of physical records and build a proper accounting system. He said I have good instincts for organizational structure." "You do?" "I told him I'd look at it after my clinical rotation starts, as a side project." "He'll hold you to that." "I know." She paused. "I told him my rate." Cole looked at her. "You charge Shepard for a side project," he said. "I charge the chapter," she said. "I like you all. I also have student loans." She met his eyes without apology. "Those aren't contradictory." Cole looked at her. In the bad light of the dusk, even on the night that started everything, he had looked at a blonde waitress holding an empty tray and seen someone who was scared and competent, and more than she appeared to be. He had not known then how much more. He had not known that the woman who delivered a note to the wrong man would turn out to be the person who organized the evidence that dismantled Victor Cross's network, who found Sandra Voss's name in a financial document before sunrise, who made a phone call without her voice breaking, and a repayment schedule with terms and a rate for professional services. He had not known, but he had looked at her in that first moment, and he had not walked away, and every decision that followed and had been built on that one. And the building had brought them here, to a Saturday night, in a room full of people who were alive and intact and present to a woman with a textbook and a rate, and 3 years of scheduled contact to the specific weight of something that had survived the night that tried to end it. "Claire," he said. She looked at him. "1 year from tonight," he said. "Where do you want to be?" She thought about it. Not long. She was not a person who needed long for questions she'd already thought about, but genuinely in the way of someone taking the question seriously. "Done with my first year of clinical rotation," she said. "With a proper nursing license in my hand, Shepard's records digitized." She paused. "Here." "Here," he said. "Here," she said again, quietly, without qualification. Cole nodded once. He looked at the room around them, the room that had been full of noise an hour ago and was settling now into something quieter and more durable, the sound of people who have been through something real together and found that the togetherness held. The night a waitress from Phoenix had walked into the Dust Raven with $300 in a folded note had tried to be the night the Red Hollow chapter of the Hells Angels was dismantled from the inside. Instead, it was the night the chapter found out what it was made of. And the woman who had accidentally started it all, who had given the wrong note to the right man in bad light, who had made a phone call with steady hands and a racing heart, who had built a list from memory and found the name that changed the shape of the case, that woman was sitting in the chapter house on a Saturday night with a nursing textbook and a repayment schedule and the specific settled look of someone who has found the place where their life is supposed to happen. Some mistakes are just the truth arriving in the wrong envelope, and some wrong deliveries change everything they were never meant to touch.